Hey guys, it's Dave. I have gone live a few minutes early here because we've had some pretty big news drop from Rocket Lab, so exciting stuff to talk about. I can see we've already got a bunch of people in the chat, so thank you so much for tuning in. Strangely enough, my viewer number still says 0, but I can see the chat's going through, so obviously there's people here. Yeah, do let me know if you can see me. I'm always a little worried on these live streams that something's not working right, and you can hear me and all that stuff. Hey Ravi, hey Freydor, and Johnny, of course. Known you quite a while. Obviously, memes and Cyberface, and yeah, a big part of the gang here. Very much appreciated. Thank you for letting me know I am live. Obviously, hey Jamie as well. Obviously, as we can see here, with a big spike in the after hours, the market is liking what they're seeing so far from Rocket Lab's numbers, which were just released, as well as, perhaps more importantly, a few other pieces of news. You may have already seen this stuff, but if not, over on Rocket Lab's investor relations page, we just got Neutron's first customer officially announced, which was something I was hoping for a while and really looking forward to. I was thinking it should be coming any time now, so very exciting. And of course, it's a multi-launch contract, not a single launch, which is kind of what Neutron's designed for, so makes a lot of sense and is very exciting. Represents, more revenue that way. I haven't actually got the chance to read this release yet, so we're just going to read this together, and you'll get my initial, unscripted reaction, of course. Hey, Johnny, thank you for tuning in once again. So, Rocket Lab, blah, 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 global leader. Yeah, they're great. Has signed a multi-launch agreement with a confidential commercial satellite constellation operator for its new rocket Neutron. Under the contract, Rocket Lab will launch 2 dedicated missions starting mid-2026. The missions will launch from, obviously, Launch Complex 3 in Virginia, the only place Neutron launches from. And this signifies the beginning of a productive collaboration that could see Neutron deploy the entire constellation. So that's very exciting. When I just read that first number of 2 launches, I'm not going to lie, I had a little bit of a disappointment in that, we saw multi-launch contract and then it's 2, and you're like, wow, it's not that big. But if they end up deploying the entire constellation, whatever it is. By the way, I would love to hear your theories about what this constellation is. When I saw the headline, my first instinct was maybe Amazon Kuiper, but now I think definitely not, for a few reasons. Number one, they've had no problem basically announcing everyone else who will be launching their Kuiper satellites, including ULA, obviously Blue Origins. They even admitted that SpaceX will be launching on the Falcon 9. And I think there was a relativity deal as well, if I recall correctly. So I really don't think Amazon would require that kind of confidentiality. Plus, this says right here, could see Neutron deploy the entire constellation, and obviously there's no way Neutron will be deploying the entire Kuiper constellation, so it must be someone else. I think Telesat is Falcon 9. I believe we've heard that Globalstar will be launching their new Apple satellites on Falcon 9 as well, from what I've heard, although if anyone in chat wants to double check that and share a link, that would be really cool. AST is an interesting theory. Obviously, they won't want to launch on Falcon 9 if they can help it, because they're kind of in a bit of a fight with SpaceX, if you haven't noticed. So obviously they don't want to be paying and handing over their proprietary satellites to SpaceX, because I guess, SpaceX, obviously, I'm sure they're very ethical and wouldn't, examine them and try to learn any trade secrets, but just uncomfortable. So perhaps the AST deal could make a ton of sense. Yeah, let me know what you guys think. Hey, it's Sleazy and Fro Shanty, Bryson. Yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. I see we're now up to 244 viewers live. Love to see it. The after hours up to almost up 20%. I'm blown away by the stock movement over the past, call it 2 months. I have to admit, I'm just blown away. Very thankful I did not sell any covered calls on it. I've just decided I want to buy and hold a good company, and Rocket Lab, I think, is a really good company. So yeah, seeing all those gains, really enjoying it. But at the same time, I wasn't expecting a move this high, this fast. I always felt that the potential was there, but I thought it might take a little longer. So I'm a little bit uneasy right now. I've paused buying more, but I'm definitely not selling. And we'll just see how this goes. I think long term, I've obviously said before I could see Rocket Lab being, $20+ billion company, but yeah, I didn't expect it to happen this fast. Love to hear your thoughts as well. Congratulations on your calls there, Barrymore. I do want to check my calls as well. It's a very small position relative to my shares, but yeah, last time I checked, they were like a 5x, a 7x, I think, something like that. So now I think those call options must be like at least a 10x, which is amazing, obviously. Welcome again, Viking and Andrew. Appreciate your support as channel members. And since we do have 281 viewers, if anyone wants to throw a subscription, not membership, well, either or, but if anyone's not subscribed on YouTube, that would be appreciated. Always helps out a lot. Let's continue looking at the news here because there was more. So they scheduled their next launch for Knees. As I said in my previous unpopular opinion video, I'm not as focused on Electron anymore, more focused on Neutron and space systems and that space application of the future. But obviously it is important for the short-term revenue numbers and earnings numbers. So let's take a look at this. Scheduled to launch during a 14-day window, opening on November 23rd. So that's pretty good. We do already have, I think, a couple haste launches rumored to be quite soon, if I recall correctly. So I did retweet out a tweet that Scott O made. He tracks Electron launches much more closely. He's a good follow on Twitter if you're interested. Maybe we'll just take a quick look at that to see how the schedule is shaping up. And I see we're now up to 22+% in the after hours. You love to see it. You're sad your put options won't exercise. Well, that is a great problem to have, my friend Andrew, and glad you're doing well as well, Daniel. So let's take a look at this. Man, you guys are jumping ahead of me. I can't keep up with, reading all the updates, and obviously you guys are ahead of me. So Scott O on the launches for this year. By the way, they're also live streaming as well. So yeah, we're looking at probably Lidos 2, which for haste in the 19th, and then this Knees one, which they just officially announced, coming soon as well. Then we potentially have our next Varda launch for those space-based pharmaceuticals, as well as another confidential haste launch in December, potentially another Black Sky launch, and Knees 4 as well in December potentially. So shaping up to be a very busy Q4 despite a quite slow start, but hopefully they can finish off the year with a bang, although not the kind of bang that is a rocket blowing up on the pad. We don't need any more of that. Yeah, I was actually, I'm not going to lie, Leland, I thought about selling my calls recently. I've said, and I am holding firm, that I will hold all my shares basically very long term. But the calls, I thought the stock was getting a little peaky, and nothing wrong with taking some gains when you've got like a 10x. I haven't done it yet, but I'll look at it after today. I mean, now we're up 24%. I do say that I think on good news, stocks generally outperform to the upside as well as outperform to the downside. So maybe there's a bit of an overreaction going on here and will fall afterwards. So I'll look at that, but let's continue on with the news of the day. So we have that signed. Yeah, Neutron well positioned. Oh, they even talk about NSSL, which, as I've said, is extremely important and is something I will be looking for very closely. They call out specifically the Space Force's OSP-4, which is apparently a separate IDIQ contract, indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity. So that's like a max is 968. They wouldn't necessarily get all that, but that's like the max amount that's up for grabs. Always be on the lookout for those IDIQ contracts because they can be a little bit deceiving. Congratulations, William, on your ASCS positions. Yeah, there could be some shorts covering. Yeah, you love to see it. Well, I mean, you worry that when it's so sharp, it may have a fall, but, that's okay. Okay, so this launch, we kind of knew it was coming anyway. It's cool. That's great. Let's move on to the other news. Granted Air Force Research Award to showcase digital engineering with new Archimedes engine. I think we all wish we had more shares, Viking. I know I've been saying I wish I had more shares. I try to preach, a little bit of diversification and responsibility in case things don't go the way we expect. So I did hold out some index funds holding the broader markets. Obviously, right now I'm wishing I had just thrown it all in Rocket Lab, but at least I can say I preached responsibility because nobody's right 100% of the time. So if I went all in on Rocket Lab and I turned out to be wrong, well, at least we did have a little bit of a safety net, although it turns out that the safety net does not appear to have been needed. Okay, let's check out this research award. Generally, research awards are quite small, so probably not huge. Thanks for sharing, Rav, that Lunar shares are also up big. I'll be sure to check those out. I think Intuitive Machines earnings call is tomorrow, though, right? Not today, if I remember correctly. We're up to 335 viewers also, so thank you guys for tuning in. I do appreciate it. So let's check out this contract. Federal defense contract up to $8 million. So yeah, pretty negligible, but every little bit helps. Showcase Rocket Lab's engineering processes and support development of their new Archimedes engine. So yeah, that's nice. It's almost like free money. Well, I won't say free money, but they're going to work on Archimedes either way and probably do a lot of these things. So you might as well get paid to do it by the government. This latest contract recognizes the potential of Rocket Lab and Neutron to provide capability for the NSSL program. So a lot of controversy around should they or should they not get in 2025 for NSSL. I read this as a little bit of a vote of confidence that they should get in, and at least some decision makers in the Space Force agree that they should get in. So maybe that's a even better sign more than the $8 million itself, the confidence that is being shown in Rocket Lab and Neutron, because as I said, once you get into that NSSL lane 1, it is very exciting for the potential revenues. And we looked at recently Falcon 9 winning something like $900 million in launch contracts. So obviously a company Rocket Lab size, even 10% of that would be really big for their numbers. Or anyway. This will facilitate the larger effort to develop digital engineering technology ecosystem, reducing cost, schedule, and risk throughout Space Force programs. Options to expand Rocket Lab's implementation of digital engineering processes across the Neutron propulsion system and further build the digital engineering framework for NSSL Phase 3 Lane 1 launch providers. Yeah, it's nice. As I said, I think 8 million, not huge, but it's kind of free money, and it's a great show of confidence and support from the Space Force, because there's been a lot of, basically lobbying around trying to keep Rocket Lab out by some of the incumbents on that. And yeah, if you're not aware, they did already have a $24 million contract supporting Rocket Lab. Specifically, I believe this one was the upper stage. The upper stage. And they're also exploring point-to-point cargo uses for Neutron as well. So that's a nice little research agreement for them. Sorry, I'm just going to try and get caught up on chat now. They've already done Neutron Stage 2 wet dress. Yeah, I want to see that Stage 1 test fire as well eventually. Well, obviously, when we see the Stage 1 come together, it's just going to be very exciting. Okay, let's close this. Have they released the actual results? Let's see. I'm pretty sure they released the numbers already, if not the presentation. News. Yeah. 55% year-on-year growth and guides to record revenue in Q4. So Scotto could have been right on with that one as well with his projections. But let's take a look. So, what a great company. I agree, Andrew. Let's take a look at guidance here. So, if you're not aware, they guided for $100 to $105 million in revenue. What did they get? Where are we here? Kind of broke it all up here. I just wanted to see the top line revenue number. Okay, so first of all, record guidance. Man, Scott was right on with his recent video. So record guidance of $125 to $135 million in Q4. That would be massive. If you recall, I mean, just getting to the $100 million mark per quarter was a huge step up on last year. So I thought it would be reasonable to expect a little bit of consolidation around this level. The presentation is out. Okay, I will check that in 1 second. Thank you, David, for sharing. As I was saying, I thought it would be reasonable to expect a little bit of consolidation around maybe $100 million, but the growth has clearly continued here as they're now pushing $125 to $135 million in Q4. And remember, they have a lot of visibility because we're already partway into Q4, so generally you can rely on these numbers. Okay, let's check out the presentation here. If it has been released. Unfortunately, I just can't keep up with all the news that comes out because it's just too fast and furious. Good to see you again, Cam, and Braille as well. I mean, the satellite manufacturing business, William, is huge. Yeah, I've said before, if they were only launch, I don't think I would have invested in Rocket Lab. So I really do believe in that end-to-end vision and, the space systems business and future space applications. Okay, let's take a look at this. Hey, Barb, thank you again for being a member and joining us here on the live stream. Okay, let's go through the news of this presentation before the earnings call starts. I just want to make sure. I think it's due to start around 5, so there's, broadcast has not begun yet. I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss that. Okay, let's see. So highlights, electron, neutron, space systems, Q&A. Okay. Multi-launch agreement signed. Again, this is the big piece of news. How are we doing in after hours now? Have we fallen? We've fallen back down a little bit. We're still up 20% on the day. Still amazing. Not going to complain at all. Record number of annual launches with more scheduled for the year. $55 million in new launch contracts signed in Q3. That's great because previous Q2 earnings I felt was a little bit light on new contracts being signed and being added to the backlog. So this Neutron multi-launch agreement, very exciting, especially the potential for more launches down the line, assuming the first 2 launches go well in 2026. And by the way, like people who say there's a lot of people out there saying there's no way Neutron launches before 2027. I don't think Peter Beck signs this deal to launch in 2026 unless he's very confident he can actually launch in 2026. I really don't. So, Well, I hope I'm glad your grandfather has made a few bucks as well, Rail. Um, oh, after 19. Thank you so much for the super chat. I very much appreciate the support. Mars would be interesting conversation to have later as well, especially in light of the election results. Not to dive into politics, just how it may, impact the space industry landscape. Oh, we have a new subscriber as well, Denis, I think, or Dennis. Not sure how you pronounce it, but it's very much appreciated. Welcome aboard. Okay, Mars sample return. Obviously, I called out this in a relatively recent video, talking about how exciting that would be. This is just a study, so again, relatively small dollar amounts, but they'll be in the mix at least for that $2 billion potential contract. Satellites coming off production line at scale, so they're just churning out those satellites, most likely the Globalstar, and starting to get going on those SDA Tranche 2 satellites, the transport layer ones, I believe. The space services, once again, everything we're selling and developing feeds into our overall vision to deliver our own services from space with our own satellite constellation. This is what I have been so excited about since I started investing in Rocket Lab. Gosh, it's probably been 2.5 years now, maybe, since I invested. I think they had been public for maybe a year before I hopped on board, something like that. So just catching up on chat again. Sorry about those beeps. To be honest, I don't know how to adjust that volume, or I don't even know if I have control over it. That's something I can try to look into after today's live stream, but I can't really change it while we're live here. So sorry about that. You'll just have to bear with me on that one. Okay, continuing on. So $105 million, which represents a 55% year-over-year increase. And check the guidance. That is the top end of their guidance, which was for 100 to 105 million. So very accurate once again in their guidance, and they seem to usually hit the high end. So that's nice, especially considering launch was a little bit late. Looks like we have some... I'm going to mute the music because every time that music plays on a live stream, my videos get demonetized. So if you guys notice that I'm still looking at the presentation and the stream itself actually starts, let me know and we'll hop over. But it's supposed to be around 5, so we'll continue looking at the presentation until then. 80% year-over-year backlog growth, absolutely amazing. Obviously, a lot of that coming from that big SDA deal, 500 odd $1 million, or as they like to say, $500 million, and holding strong at those levels despite realizing record revenues. And again, next quarter looking for another record, 125 to 135. Man, this company's getting big fast. The revenue growth is quite something. Welcome. Thanks for joining as well on V. And yeah, nothing wrong with some diversification, as Andrew said. I have said many times that I have diversified, even though I am extremely confident in Rocket Lab. I did hold some other stuff. I think it's just the responsible thing to do, especially if you have a family or you're looking to buy a house in the future or something like that. You never know. Looking at Electron, now the world's third most frequently launched rocket in 2024. Okay. 67% increase in Electron's average sale price. Yeah, the ASP has been rising nicely, now at 8.4. I mean, it's nice. And this one was very nice news as well. 55 million in new launch contracts signed in Q3. That must be, 6 launches? Maybe 7? 6 or 7? They're behind the Long March 2 as well. Okay, so Electron only behind Falcon 9 and Long March 2, the Chinese rocket, obviously. Okay, 3 missions in Q3. Again, pretty light when they were originally planning 22 launches for the year, but obviously they've still hit their guide. So that, tends to signal a pretty strong quarter from Space Systems. This one was quite cool. I did love seeing them sign a contract and launch the satellite in just 10 weeks. I know Firefly likes to talk a lot about their responsive launch capabilities, but I don't think they've done something like this before. So Rocket Lab definitely able to launch at a moment's notice, get those satellites integrated into the vehicle and all that. Yeah, it was super cool. Let me know, Dalek, how much is Lunar up today in the after hours? Curious to hear. So, key accomplishments. Let's see how Neutron's progressing. Another thing I'm really excited about. Launching, yeah, we know where it's launching from. 2026 and 2027. So I assume that's one launch in 2020. Oh, wow. Thank you, Nick. Very appreciated. Thanks for the super chat and your support over the years. You've been around for a while now. I do recognize and keep track of those names that I remember from when I first started covering the company. And Jamie, thank you as well for subscribing. Welcome aboard. Okay, so yeah, one launch probably in 2026 and one in 2027 for this constellation. And this is consistent with their target price for Neutron, so they haven't discounted it. We're probably looking at like $55 million a launch, maybe $50 million, somewhere in there. So obviously those two Neutron launches alone representing more than 10 launches for Electron. Let me just save my voice a little bit here. Again, talking about the NSSL program, something I have gone over quite a bit. Oh, wow. We have William gifting 5 channel memberships. I think that's the first time I've had a channel membership gifted in the channel, and I do appreciate it. Welcome to all my new channel members, and hope you continue on. It's much appreciated. I have to update that splash screen at the beginning with a few new people as well. So now I have even more people to update. Maybe I'll have to either shrink the font even smaller or do some kind of scrolling thing. But I apologize for the sound. Someone else mentioned they are very loud, and I don't seem to have control over changing that while it's live. So I guess we'll just have to bear with me while the notifications come through. Up my mic volume? That I can do. Okay, you know what? Here's an idea. Let me turn this down. Okay, I hope that's a bit better. Las Vegas. Okay, I turned down the desktop volume a little bit. Let me know if that helps. I think we're getting close to the... Holy guacamole here. Thank you, Dream, for the subscription as well. Getting a bunch of notifications. Okay, I'm just muting the music. I don't think we've started quite yet. Let me know if I get too quiet now or you can't hear Peter once the noise starts. Okay. They'll be going live in the next few minutes, so we're probably not getting through this whole presentation. Lunar up 6.25 after hours. Okay. I was thinking of even live streaming the Intuitive Machines earnings call if it's tomorrow as well, because I'm trying to learn more about that company, but I don't know how many of you guys will be interested in that. Okay. Well, let's continue. So we already know about NSSL. And we kind of know about some of these. We learned about the new one. Okay, I love... By the way, there was a guy named Dave G who started kind of highlighting this this diagram and showing different pieces of what was ready. And I love that they're doing it now, too. Congratulations, Mark, on what you've made. And yeah, what I've made, we've all done quite well. Where are we now on the stock price? Back up 21%. So yeah, all doing quite well today. Congratulations, everyone, and welcome from New Zealand, the boys, as well as Lisa. Yeah, I might do lunar earnings, so stay tuned for that. Next up, qualification campaign. Okay, so some really cool pictures of the fairings here. Nice to actually make your own fairings and not, order them from Europe. Peter standing in the middle. Yeah, that is a big space. Very cool. Very cool. Interstage panels are in production. And yeah, Trosby, you are correct. I have around 15,300, something like that, plus some call options as well that have done even better than the shares. But the vast majority is just shares and no covered calls or anything on that. Man, this looks amazing, eh? I love it. Stage 2 initial wet dress rehearsal involving the stage in flight configuration with avionics fluids and propellant management systems. Now, this, I believe, is still in New Zealand. They're doing this testing. Although those tanks... No, this has got to still be New Zealand. I don't know about Global Star. I haven't looked into it in depth. I know Apple investing has certainly helped them a lot, as well as their stock. I wouldn't be shocked if Apple eventually acquires them one day. Okay, so stage 1 propellant tanks. Let me just make sure the earnings call hasn't started. Nope, still just background music. And yeah, I love the diagrams showing where everything will go. So we have the propellant tank undergoing manufacture and qualification. Obviously, they've got to do those pressure tests and all that kind of thing for the stage 1 as well, probably to explosion. Thanks Dan for confirming it's in New Zealand. And Russell, my newest channel member before today, at least, thank you. You've been one of the greatest supporters. Yeah, and we don't want those Ariane 6 fairings. Work on my GeoGuessr game. Yeah, it's weak, I know. Archimedes testing, obviously continuing. I like how they explain it's not just a one and done situation. You don't just fire one engine once and you're done. It's a full test campaign. Cadence has doubled. Steady state across multiple tests. This is good. This is very good. And we've already seen a lot of pictures of engine production. We've seen this one, these two, this one being transferred. They give us a number? No. Okay, so we do know, I believe there's at least 4 engines completed. So probably more by now, but I think 4 is what we've seen pictures of. Launch pad structures. Hold down mechanisms. One thing is the launch pad. I don't know if you guys saw Markets with Madison in her little interview when she went to the launch pad under construction. It still looked like it needed a fair bit of progress. I know these things can come together fairly quickly because 1 second you're looking at a flat piece of dirt and the next second you've got a giant slab of concrete that looks like a nice pad, but still some work to be done on the infrastructure side of things for sure. That looks like a 165 steel ton launch mount. It will be installed at the launch pad in the coming weeks. The other thing is, though, with the launch pad, it'll still continue under development and expansion after the first launch. The first launch will be very much like they'll get to the minimum viable state they need to get a launch going. And thank you, Tropsy, for becoming a member. I will be sure to have a beer on you after this video because my voice will definitely need it. So that's pretty cool. Oh, some more nice pictures of the launch site. You got those tanks coming in now. We saw one of them before. Now we've got both of them. Propellant tanks. This is actually looking a lot better than the last pictures I already saw like a few weeks ago. This and yeah. Yeah, it's coming together. Flame trench. Yeah. Okay. And for scale, wow, when you see the guy down here. Okay, thank you guys. I will switch over.
Such statements are based upon information available to the company as of the date hereof and are subject to change for future developments. Except as required by law, the company does not undertake any obligation to update these statements. Our remarks and press release today also contain non-GAAP financial measures within the meaning of Regulation G enacted by the SEC. Included in such release and our supplemental materials are reconciliations of these historical non-GAAP financial measures to the comparable financial measures calculated in accordance with GAAP. Now, this call is also being webcast with a supporting presentation, and a replay and copy of the presentation will be available on our website. Our speakers today are Rocket Lab founder and Chief Executive Officer Sir Peter Beck, as well as Chief Financial Officer Adam Spice. They will be discussing key business highlights, including updates on our launch and space systems programs. And we will discuss the financial highlights and outlook before we finish by taking questions. So with that, let me turn the call over to Sir Peter.
Thanks, Marielle, and thanks for everybody joining us today. Before we take you through the achievements of the quarter, I'd like to remind everybody what every launch, every development milestone, every spacecraft we build is working towards. Rocket Lab is an end-to-end space company. We provide the ride to space with our launch vehicles, and we build the spacecraft to do the work in orbit. This ultimately gives us the keys to space, unlocking the largest market of all space applications. with Phase 1 and 2, the rockets and the spacecraft now well established, we're well positioned to create our own constellations to provide in-demand services and capabilities in space. In Q3, we strengthened this position with a few key achievements, including the signing of a multi-launch deal for Neutron with a commercial constellation operator. And we've been very considered in the way that we've approached Neutron's first commercial contracts, and I look forward to sharing more on this later in the call. On the small rocket front, we successfully launched multiple Electron missions in Q3 and signed $55 million in new Electron launch contracts. Excuse me. A testament to strong and growing demand for dedicated small launch and acknowledgement of Electron's position. As for space systems, I'll be sharing updates on various programs, but one key call-out is the Mars Sample Return Contract Study. Anybody who's familiar with Mars Sample Return understands NASA believes their current mission architecture is too costly, will take too long, so they've requested innovative new proposals to deliver samples sooner and bring the cost down. We're delighted to be selected by NASA to put forward a study into how Rocket Lab would achieve this, and I'm very excited to share in more details about our proposal to support the mission today. And of course, to deliver space systems at scale, you need to be able to pump out constellations of spacecraft quickly and cost-effectively. I'm proud to share that our spacecraft production line in Long Beach is churning out spacecraft at a faster rate than ever, with builds underway for a backlog of more than 40 spacecraft. All of these achievements and capabilities feed into our final strategic pillar, being able to build and launch and operate our own constellations. I'll address it right up front, which is that we're not ready to reveal details on what this constellation or application may be. But I think it's important to understand the strong foundation we've built up across launch and space systems to enable it in due course. Okay, excuse me. On to some quick financial highlights for Q3. We delivered another really strong quarter with positive metrics across the business. The third quarter revenue topped out at $105 million, within $1 million of our record revenue achieved last quarter. That's a 55% revenue increase year on year, while our backlog has grown 80% year on year to set at $1.05 billion at the end of September. I'll let Adam dig into the numbers properly, but I think it's important to note up front that once again that we're delivering on the old Rocket Lab adage and mantra of we do what we say we were going to do, across both engineering and technical achievements, but as well as financial goals. Okay, on to Electron updates. We've reached 12 missions for the year and counting, setting a new annual launch record for Electron. Only 2 rockets globally launched more than Electron, that's the Falcon 9 and the Chinese Long March, making Electron one of the most globally significant rockets flying today. Launch cadence is one thing, but doing so in a financially sustainable way is quite another. We've sold 55 million in new Electron launch contracts in Q3, but what's really important to note about is the significant increase in average sales price. This is now 60% higher than when Electron first started flying. We've brought a service to market that works, that customers need, and we've proven we can scale. The cost just reflects how rare and sought after this capability is. Just to help visualize it, here's a snapshot of the global launch cadence this year across all vehicles, and you can see Electron is right up in the top ranking in number 3 spot. Now, onto Electron launches for the quarter. We had 3 missions for 3 separate commercial constellation operators during Q3. Each of the missions are part of multi-launch contracts with return customers. Electron provides a vital sought-after service for small-sat constellation operators who want to be in control of their orbits, launch schedule, and mission parameters in a way that's just not possible on large rideshare missions. We had another quick turnaround between missions too, launching Electrons back-to-back from Launch Complex 1 within just 8 days of each other. Speaking of fast turnarounds, after Q3, we completed another record launch in record time. We launched a mission for a confidential constellation operator just 10 weeks after signing contract. This kind of speed is pretty well unheard of in the space industry. It's typical to take a year to go from contract to orbit. And of course, that causes bottlenecks and limited launch opportunities for satellite operators. Electron has plugged this gap, getting a satellite operation on orbit faster so they can test their technology sooner, begin generating revenue for constellations earlier, or collect urgent data from space on demand. I've discussed at length previously that launch is a lumpy business. It's common for customers to request delays and new launch dates, causing constant manifest shuffles. This results in an ever-changing, fluid launch schedule, but because we have a factory of rockets and 3 launch sites standing by to support, we can slot new customers in as these gaps open up quickly. Now, I'm sure the software team will laugh at me for this, but in reference to ultimate flexibility, it's a feature and not a bug of the Electron business model, especially as we collect up to 90% of the contract value for every mission before launch day, with revenue recognised on launch. So if a launch slips a month here or there, the overall impact to the business is pretty well negligible. Right, moving on from small launch onto Neutron updates. Okay, so we've signed a launch agreement with a constellation operator, which encompasses 2 very early launches on Neutron. Thanks to our proven track record with Electron, the space industry has come to expect high-performing, reliable launch vehicles from Rocket Lab. Because of this, we've worked with a lot of different customers for Neutron's first few missions, but we're in the fortunate position to be able to choose who flies first and have made a careful and considered strategic decisions around that. We see this agreement as an important opportunity that signifies the beginning of a productive collaboration that could see Neutron deploy this particular customer's entire constellation. I'm confident in these 2 launches will be the first of many more to come from this particular customer. Now, we've really been methodical about when we open the bookings on Neutron 2. It's all too common in the space industry for aspiring launch providers to sign non-binding agreements and sell missions at a loss to fund development. We know that it's better to bring a real rocket to the market first and to command a premium price. As we draw closer to Neutron's debut next year, conversations with customers and demands for launch slots have started to mature. As everyone will expect, I'm very happy to say that the contract value, this particular contract value, is in family with our standard Neutron pricing for launches. One of the programs that Neutron has been ideally suited for from day one was, when we conceived the vehicle, was the US's Space Force National Security Space Launch Program, or NSSL. The Space Force recently opened up the RFPs for the program's next Lane 1 on-ramp, which will see us compete to qualify for a share of up to $5.6 billion of national security launches. There is an unnerving bottleneck in the medium launch market currently, creating a risk for national security. Bringing new launch capability to NSSL is critical to increasing the DoD's diversity of opportunities, assuring access to space for national security, and with our proven track record, market-leading design, and established infrastructure, Neutron is a pretty compelling choice. We're well past the design phase, now moving into Neutron's build and test campaigns. Keeping our schedule for the first launch next year puts us inside the 2025 year-end timeframe sought by the Space Forces for the next on-ramp. We brought a new vehicle to market before with Electron, which is a reliably delivered national security payloads to orbit for several years. And with Electron, we reached 50 launches faster than any other commercially developed rocket in history. So we know how to do this, and we know how to do this well. Government interest in Neutron's development is ramping up in other areas too. This quarter, we're awarded an $8 million study contract with the US Air Force's Research Lab to showcase our digital engineering prowess with Archimedes. This contract has a tie-in with the NSSL program as well, where it includes the option to expand our digital engineering processes and further build the digital engineering framework for NSSL Phase 3 Lane 1 launch providers. This contract is a bit of a win-win when it comes to defence industry partnerships. It not only allows the US Air Force to collaborate with industry leaders like the Archimedes team to help develop and modernise the US Air Force's engineering processes and capabilities, but it also supports smoother integration of Neutron into the NSSL program to more efficiently and quickly provide for some of the nation's most critical missions. Elsewhere across the DoD, the US Transcom has extended our 2022 research agreement that allows us to continue to explore point-to-point cargo delivery with Neutron. And we've recently received confirmation from the US Space Force's Space Systems Command that Neutron can now compete for missions under OSP-4, a near $1 billion indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contract that we're on ramp to a few years back. All right, moving on to now to Neutron's development progress and some of the technical milestones we've hit this quarter. We're well past the design phase now and deep into the qualification and testing of our large-scale flight hardware. Starting with the reusable captive fairing for Neutron, or as we like to call it, the Hungry Hippo, these fairing halves remain attached to Neutron's first stage for the full flight, simply opening to release the payload in the second stage before closing back and returning back to Earth with the rest of stage 1 ready for another flight. These fairing halves will soon be going through their mechanical testing before assembly and integration onto the large-scale composite panels and the 7-metre wide barrels that make up the first stage. Another big milestone was the recent successful test of the second stage. We conducted its first wet dress rehearsal in a flight configuration, going through the pressures, mechanical loads, processes and procedures that would be seen in flight operations. Part of the test campaign included onboard avionics taking command and control of the stage and demonstrating pressurization, fill, drain and cold flow operations. This has been one of the biggest integrated milestones yet, proving out not only the flight hardware but also the supporting infrastructure to operate the vehicle. We have flight hardware in production for all other Neutron composite structures, including the barrels and domes for the vehicle's first stage propellant tank. All of the internal propellant management devices, the avionics, are on track for integration to the stage 1 tank before it goes through the same set of test campaign as the second stage has just done. Now on to Archimedes. We've talked about it before, our approach before with Archimedes, and how we were strategic in taking our time to bring a flight-ready engine to the test stand. That means we could hit the ground running to qualify it, rather than mess around with early prototypes needing lots of design tweaks and changes in manufacturing that would ultimately slow the program down. We've seen that strategy really pay off in these past few months. Our engine test cadence in Mississippi has doubled over the quarter, and we brought multiple engines to the test stand. The thing to point out here too is that a rocket engine program is never a one-and-done scenario. Archimedes engines will go through short burst tests, full duration hot fires and tweaks all the way up to Neutron's first flight. So far though, we've continued to see strong performance from the Archimedes, and we're able to iterate updates rapidly, which is really where you want to be in this point in time in the test campaign. All that to say is that the cornerstone of any rocket program depends on how quickly and reliably you can scale engine production in parallel. I know I've said it before, but it bears repeating, because building your first rocket engine is hard. Building it 10, 20, 50 times and at pace that can keep up with demand is even harder. With that in mind, we continue to scale production for Archimedes at the same time that we're testing it. We've got the assembly line in California humming, with engines shipping out the door frequently to Mississippi. setting us up well to get into a good launch cadence with Neutron after first flight. A rocket program is much more than just the vehicle, of course, and its engines. Launch infrastructure is a critical component and one of the pieces that we've had a bit of practice to thanks to having stood up 3 pads on 2 hemispheres with Electron. Launch sites are a little bit like an iceberg. There's so much of the infrastructure that is underground or hidden in the development phase. With that now well established, we're starting to put the finishing touches on the above ground infrastructure, including a massive 165-ton steel structure launch mount that will hold down mechanisms. It's from this structure that Neutron will lift off next year. The launch mount will be installed in LC3 in the coming few weeks, and from there the focus will start to shift to pad commissioning before Flight 1. On the ground at Launch Complex 3, some really big long lead items have made their way to the pad at Wallops Island, including 2 90,000-gallon propellant tanks that were installed in Q3. Each of them is longer than one of our Electron rockets, which really helps put into perspective the scale of the works that are happening at LC3. Just a few miles up the road from the launch pad, we've completed the construction of the assembly and integration and test building, where Neutron's vehicles will go through their final checks before they're taken to the launch pad. Having this building only 3 miles from the launch pad is a real strategic advantage for us, as we don't have to grapple with the slow and expensive, complex logistics of transporting a hulking rocket across the country just to get to the launch pad. That wraps up the headline items on the launch front. So now moving into space systems. So one of NASA's flagship missions is the Mars Sample Return Program, which aims to bring scientifically selected samples from Mars, back from Mars to Earth for the first time in history. But NASA has said that their current architecture is too costly at $11 billion and too slow, with the samples not expected to be into the hands of scientists until 2040. So the agency put out a call to industry for new proposals, and I'm proud to confirm we were selected to conduct a study. We're putting forward a highly compelling concept that will return Mars rocks faster and at a fraction of the cost of the current cost of the program. This mission is one of the biggest, most ambitious projects NASA has ever undertaken. It will completely change the way that we think about our solar system, potentially answer whether life ever existed on Mars, and help prepare for the first human explorers on the Red Planet. While it might not be obvious at first glance, it's a mission that we're actually uniquely suited to. Now, our fingerprints are already all over Mars. Our technology has been incorporated into missions like the Mars InSight lander, the Ingenuity helicopter, and even the cruise stage that brought Perseverance to Mars, enabling the very rovers that are collecting the samples to be brought to Earth under the Mars Sample Return. From orbiters and rovers, landers, cruise stages, we have experience in delivering mission success on the Red Planet. Now, everything we've put into place over the years, either through our own organic development or through acquisitions of some of the industry's leading technology suppliers, has been part of our methodical strategy to offer vertically integrated solutions for complex missions just like these. Mars Sample Return requires an immense depth of experience and capability, the very kind that our team and technologies have delivered on before. We have the expertise in building and launching small rockets from little planets. We have the innovative Mars spacecraft. We have demonstrated re-entry capability. We've enabled rendezvous and proximity missions. We're leaders in guidance, navigation, control, and our flight software is already on moon landers. And we know how to manage large and complicated missions, including ones for NASA. We've shown time and time again that we're disruptors in the industry who are able to conduct missions beyond Earth's orbit on a rapidly fast development timelines, and when others say they can't do it, we can do it at a fraction of the traditional cost. We look forward to delivering this once again for Mars Sample Return should our proposal make it through the selection process later this year. Now on to other updates across our space systems business. Before I dive into more specific mission updates, I want to provide a quick snapshot of just some of the various programs underway. This is just the latest lineup of spacecraft we're building right now or have already completed. Like our 2 Escapade spacecraft for Mars, 2 completely different constellation spacecraft, one for cell connectivity for MDA Globalstar, the other for national security and the Space Development Agency, and other individual technology test missions ranging from connectivity in space to cryogenic fuel storage on orbit. Beyond these missions and constellations, we continue to do strongly in our merchant space systems business with mega constellation contracts too. Some of you will remember me talking about scaling up our satellite facilities in California as we bring on new and bigger spacecraft contracts. Well, part of the benefit for us taking over the previous Virgin Orbit building for pennies on the dollar for our new engine production site was it allowed us to use that extra space in our headquarters to be converted to our satellite production facility. We're really starting to see that strategy pay dividends with production lines of our various spacecraft platforms now up and running. Without a single shovel in the ground, we've avoided all the headaches of having to build new buildings and factories from scratch and save precious time and resource in our scaling strategy. And the beauty of having all those space systems products co-located in one building, there are simple ease of integration for our teams. A technician can literally walk across the floor, hand over an avionics box to a spacecraft integration team, as opposed to waiting for months for a supplier to produce it, ship it, and then deliver it. It's really the true beauty of vertical integration for our business. Now onto some more specific program updates under the Space Systems umbrella. And if I can stick with Mars for just the Mars theme for just a little bit longer, in Q3 we completed and delivered the 2 spacecraft for the ESCAPADE science mission to Mars for NASA. It was a really monumental feat in itself, given the 3.5-year time span handed to us to deliver this mission. Unfortunately, however, outside our control, the rocket these satellites were launching on wasn't quite ready in time for that Mars transfer window, so the mission has been somewhat delayed. But the team is standing by and ready to support once the new launch date is set. Onto our $500 million prime contract with the Space Development Agency for their Tranche 2 Transport Layer constellation. The team is hitting some great technical targets within the program. The preliminary design of the spacecraft complete. The work can begin pulling the hardware together in the clean rooms at headquarters. This progress puts us in a strong position for the upcoming solicitation of 200 satellites under the Tranche 3 of the SDA's program, a procurement process expected to begin in 2025. And finally, to wrap up Space Systems, our next 2 satellites for Varda Space Industries have been completed and are now ready for launch. Our Pioneer-class space satellites host Varda's capsules and provide power, communications, propulsion, and attitude control for the mission. It's our first spacecraft for Varda helped bring the capsule back home from space, landing it in the Utah desert last year, with our next spacecraft set to do the same thing again, but this time over Australia, where both missions are set to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere and land in southern Australia soon after launch next year. In the meantime, the team is already working on the 4th Pioneer spacecraft for the same Varda mission. And before I hand it over to Adam, I just wanted to wrap up with a couple of personnel changes at the board and executive level for this past quarter. So Mike Griffin has finished up on the Rocket Lab board after a 4-year tenure serving the company. We're incredibly grateful for his experience and leadership, helping guide Rocket Lab's growth from a private startup to a global industry leader in launch and space systems, and really want to thank him and wish him all the best as he retires from Rocket Lab's board. But as one chapter ends, another 2 begin at Rocket Lab across board and executive level. This quarter, we welcomed Frank Klein to the team as our new Chief Operations Officer. Frank joins us with 30 years of international manufacturing experience and leadership in the automotive industry at Daimler, Mercedes-Benz, and most recently a prominent EV company. As a COO, Frank is leading our efforts to scale global manufacturing of our spacecraft, launch vehicles, and spacecraft components. And it's great to have a seasoned and experienced leader like Frank bring his wealth of knowledge in lean manufacturing and scaling to Rocket Lab. And Ken Possenried also joined us on the board of directors this past quarter. He joins Rocket Lab after a 35-year career at Lockheed Martin in financial leadership positions, including serving as the Space Prime's Chief Financial Officer. Ken's deep aerospace and defense industry experience, combined with his financial leadership, adds to even more horsepower on an already impressive board lineup, and it's fantastic to have him on board to help us shape the future. So with that, I'll hand it over to Adam now to provide further commentary and to discuss our financial highlights and outlook. Over to you, Adam.
Great. Thanks, Pete. All right. Third quarter 2024 revenue was $105 million, which was at the high end of our prior guidance range and reflects significant year-on-year growth of 55%, driven by strong contribution from both business segments, but led by Space Systems. Our launch services segment delivered revenue of $21 million, in line with our prior guidance. Our current backlog continues to support our 2024 target average revenue per launch of $7.5 million, with some quarterly variability tied to volume purchase commitments, launch location, and mission assurance requirements. Our space systems segment delivered $83.9 million in the quarter, near the high end of our prior guidance range of $79 million to $84 million, reflecting sequential growth of over 9%, driven primarily by a strong quarter from our space solar business. Now turning to gross margin. GAAP gross margin for the third quarter was 26.7%, in line with our prior guidance range of 25 to 27%. Non-GAAP gross margin for the third quarter was 31.3%, which was also in line with our prior guidance range of 30 to 32%. Relatedly, we ended Q3 with production-related headcount of 964, up 50 from the prior quarter. Now turning to backlog. We ended Q3 2024 with $1.05 billion of total backlog, with launch backlog of $326 million and space systems backlog of $721 million. Relative to Q3 of last year, total backlog increased 80%, or $465 million, primarily due to our $515 million contract award to build 18 spacecraft for the SDA, and we won last year. Sequentially, there's a slight remixing of our backlog as a result of particularly strong bookings in our launch segment. We continue to cultivate a healthy pipeline, including multi-launch deals and large satellite manufacturing contracts that can create lumpiness in our backlog growth, given the size and complexities of these opportunities. We expect approximately 50% of current backlog to be recognized as revenues within 12 months. Turning to operating expenses. GAAP operating expenses for the third quarter of 2024 were $79.9 million, up $9.5 million sequentially, which was at the low end of our guidance range of $80 million to $82 million. Non-GAAP operating expenses for the third quarter were $68.7 million, up $10.2 million sequentially, which was also at the low end of our guidance range of $69 million to $71 million. The sequential increases in both GAAP and non-GAAP operating expenses were primarily driven by continued growth in headcount and prototype spending to support our Neutron development program, related infrastructure IT support for Neutron, and our SDA satellite contract. In R&D specifically, GAAP expenses were up $7.8 million quarter on quarter due to Neutron prototyping, materials, and headcount growth. Non-GAAP R&D expenses were up $8.1 million quarter on quarter, driven similarly to GAAP expenses. Q3 ending R&D headcount was 776, representing an increase of 103 from the prior quarter. In SG&A, GAAP expenses increased $1.7 million quarter on quarter, largely due to an increase in outside services related to legal and IT, with IT spend largely related to security and cyber requirements under our SDA contract, and legal spend driven by a range of corporate initiatives, including corporate development, as we continue to look to scale the business organically and inorganically. These legal and IT increases are paired with an increase in staff costs. Non-GAAP SG&A expenses increased $2.1 million, driven similarly to the GAAP SG&A expenses. Q3 ending SG&A headcount was 300, representing an increase of 27 from the prior quarter. In summary, total third quarter headcount was 2,040, up 180 heads from the prior quarter. Now moving to non-GAAP free cash flow and adjusted EBITDA. With regards to cash, purchases of property, equipment, and capitalized software licenses was $11 million in the third quarter of 2024, a decrease of $4.3 million from the $15.3 million in the second quarter of 2024. We continue our investment in Neutron research, testing, and production infrastructure projects, along with expansion of our satellite production and space solar solutions capacity, and we do expect our capital expenditures to increase over the next few quarters. Cash consumed from operations was $30.9 million in the third quarter of 2024, compared to $13 million in the second quarter of 2024. The sequential increase of $17.9 million was driven primarily by increased Neutron and space systems program spend and lumpiness in space systems program milestone receipts, partially offset by improved launch contract cash collections. Overall, non-GAAP free cash flow, defined as GAAP operating cash flow less purchases of property, equipment, and capitalized software in the third quarter of 2024 was a use of $41.9 million, compared to $28.3 million in the second quarter of 2024. While we are doing better versus our targeted cash consumption run rate, we do expect a pickup in cash consumption in the next few quarters, owing to an expected increase in Neutron spending ahead of our mid-2025 launch and lumpiness in large space systems milestone payment collections. The ending balance of cash, cash equivalents, restricted cash, and marketable securities was $508 million as of the end of the third quarter of 2024. We exit Q3 in a strong position to execute on our organic expansion initiatives as well as inorganic options to further vertically integrate our supply chain with the critical capabilities and expand our addressable market, consistent with what we've done successfully in the past. Adjusted EBITDA loss was $30.9 million in the third quarter of 2024, compared to a loss of $21.2 million in the second quarter of 2024. The sequential increase of $9.7 million was primarily driven by increased spending related to Neutron development. And with that, let's turn to our guidance for the fourth quarter of 2024. We expect revenue in the fourth quarter to range between $125 and $135 million. This range reflects a step up in space systems and an increase in launch cadence consistent with our prior outlook. In the past, we've broken down guidance by launch and space system segments. However, we found it difficult at best to predict launch customer readiness within a quarter and believe that providing a single top-line guidance number is more appropriate at this time, given the resilience we've witnessed as a result of the expanded diversification of our business. That said, we'll continue to report actual revenues and related gross margins of launch and space systems as distinct segments. We expect fourth quarter GAAP gross margin to range between 26% to 28% and non-GAAP gross margin to range between 32% to 34%. These forecasted GAAP and non-GAAP gross margins reflect improved mix within our space system segment, primarily within satellite manufacturing, as well as better overhead cost absorption in our launch business. We expect fourth quarter GAAP operating expenses to range between $84 million and $86 million, and non-GAAP operating expenses to range between $75 and $77 million. The quarter-on-quarter increases are driven primarily by continued Neutron investment in the staff costs, prototyping, and materials. We expect fourth quarter GAAP and non-GAAP net interest expense to be $1.5 million. And we expect fourth quarter adjusted EBITDA loss to range between $27 and $29 million, and basic shares outstanding to be approximately 501 million shares. And with that, we'll hand the call over to the operator for questions.
At this time, I would like to remind everyone, in order to ask a question, press star and the number 1 on your telephone keypad. Your first question comes from the line of Andres Sheppard with Cantor Fitzgerald. Your line is open.
Hey, everyone. Good afternoon, and congratulations on the quarter. Certainly a lot of developments, so well done. I guess first question, just on the Neutron, I just wanted to clarify. So it sounds like the target for the first launch is unchanged for mid-2025, but the multi-launch agreement that you disclosed today, that's targeted for, I believe, to start in middle of 2026. So I guess, A, just wanted to confirm that, and B, then if that's the case, why announce this contract today, just given where you still are on the Neutron development? Any color there would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, hey, Andre. Yeah, happy to take that question. So I think, we've been pretty clear about what we expect for Neutron's launch cadence to be. So, obviously one test flight, then the following year 3, and then 5, and then continue to, 7 and beyond. And, that's following pretty much the same scaling, rate as we saw that we could do with Electron. And quite frankly, I mean, if you look back through history, it's pretty difficult to see any examples of a scaling rate faster than that. So so that kind of backs into real available slots. So as we're talking to customers, obviously they want to know when is their launch slot, because they have certain mission objectives from their end. And of course, we want to know, are their spacecraft going to be ready? I think we've talked about this in the past. So it's really just a careful marry up of various customer requirements and also the launch slots that we've kind of made available to customers. And as we say on the call, we're very very selective about those especially those early slots. We need to make sure that we're there on time. We need to make sure that they're on time. So we're kind of easing into that kind of gently. With respect to announcing it now, I think it's fairly material that once we start signing a Neutron contracts, I think it's been anticipated. So I think it was a material thing that we really would have to disclose.
Yeah, and I would add to that too, Andre, that we've talked about the fact that as you start to approach Neutron readiness, you think about a time frame of kind of 12 to 18 months where you want to have your customer lined up, because you got to again have this whole synchronization to make sure that the rocket's ready. There's a long time between signing a contract usually and getting the actual payload integrated and launched. So I think the timing roughly worked out to that. And then I also think it's important that what we've also said, and I think Pete's been very very consistent in this, that we're not going to be selling heavily discounted Neutron launches just because it's a new vehicle. We bring a lot of heritage to this market because of the 54 successful launches that we've had with Electron, and so it's really did put us in a really good position to again not be out there kind of having to do heavily discounted launches just to gain credibility. So I think this was definitely an important milestone for the company to reach, and we're very happy to be able to announce that today.
Thanks, guys. That's super helpful. I appreciate all that context. Maybe just a quick follow-up, if I may. Can you maybe just remind us, what are the outstanding maybe catalysts or milestones for the Neutron development that you think investors should be aware of? And additionally, maybe if you can give us a little more granularity on the hot fire test and the production of the additional engines there. Thank you.
Yeah, sure, Andre. The best way I like to explain it is, and we tried to do a little bit of that in this presentation, was you need to think of it as three kind of pillars. One, you have launch infrastructure, and that's actually where the majority of the capital flows into. And the things that everybody should be watching there is stuff being built. Quite simply, steel going in the ground, concrete being poured, and things that look like a launch site. Now, thankfully, that's relatively easy to follow because it's sitting on the coast, and it's relatively easy to get information on that. And of course, we provide good updates. So that as long as steel is being built and shipped and propellant lines are running and all the rest of it, then you can feel pretty good about that. And then the second pillar is kind of structures. So you've seen full stage 2 tanks and flight configurations running during wet dresses, fairings, first stage tanks. So as long as you keep seeing all those large structures, I think you can see that we're on track. And they all come together relatively late in the piece for an end-to-end wet dress rehearsal. And then with Archimedes, we're in a test and qualification campaign. So what we're doing with that engine is we're finding, it's called a run box basically, is we're finding all of the operational conditions of that engine and defining what they are. So we have a kind of a desired run box, and then we'll have an actual run box. And what we're looking to do is changing various intake pressures of the propellants and various operating points and really understanding the engine and what kind of idiosyncrasies it may or may not have. So the hot fire campaign reached a really important milestone last quarter where we put a production engine that was full of all production components, valves, hardware, software, and we took it to over 100% throttle level. So I think that was a really important milestone. And working from that, it's just all about accumulating test time, putting the engine into unknown conditions, and continue to evolve the engine and increase its performance over time. And I sort of made comment in the script here that like an engine program, it's a long process. Yep, you can make fire and you can achieve kind of preliminary targets and milestones, but you're always looking to improve either manufacturing or performance or reliability of an engine over many years. So I think we're in a good spot, but those are the three things for folks to track.
Wonderful. I really appreciate all that color. Congrats again on the quarter. I'll pass it on.
Thanks, Andre.
Your next question comes from the line of Edison Yu with Deutsche Bank. Your line is open.
Hey, thank you for taking our questions, and also congrats. I know you're not saying too much on the Neutron award, but maybe I could kind of ask from a different perspective. Can you provide any context in terms of what you won relative to if the customer had already placed the launch with someone else and they switched to you, or do they have other kind of maybe like soft contracts out there with other launch providers? Just is this? I know you're saying you could launch the whole thing. Just some context around currently, what is the piece that you have?
Yeah, I mean, look, we probably can't say too much, but it's a customer that that we know, and as I mentioned, we were very strategic in these especially these early launches about who we want to almost essentially partner with on these early contracts. So look, I mean, it's not my business to get into their kind of business, but needless to say, we were happy with that particular customer, and it's a good customer for the stage and phase of the program.
Yeah, and Edison, maybe you got a little more context to that. So, as we've talked about in the past, there just are not that many companies in our space that have executed and are in a position to launch with any level of confidence. So, you've got the added dynamic that there's a range of customers out there who also have payloads that compete with some of the other launch providers. And at this point, we feel probably more comfortable launching with somebody they don't necessarily compete with. So I think that plays into a lot of the discussions that we have. And I would say that the market remains pretty robust as far as demand is concerned. When you look at the people that have capacity, a lot of that capacity has been spoken for. So really, we think Neutron is coming to market at a great time where we're really filling a new need for incremental capacity, and we're doing it in a way that's really non-competitive and non-threatening with those customers. So just a lot of the stars are starting to align on that for us with regards to Neutron.
Understood. Then a follow-up question, a bit longer term. Obviously, you got Frank on board now, and he comes from the automotive industry. And curious if you could maybe dimension the kind of scale you're looking for. Obviously, automotive is orders of magnitude higher scale than aerospace. Is Frank really coming on board to kind of take you to that much higher level, or more to kind of get the existing backlog up to speed?
Yeah, look, a bit of both, Edison, and we have some components that are at low scale, like Mars spacecraft are never going to be produced at high scale, and then we have other things like reaction wheels where we produce thousands a year of. But the one thing about production, and I can attest this, is that it all looks the same whether you're building a car or a spacecraft or a rocket. The production fundamentals are always the same. Now, yeah, of course, the numbers that roll off the end of the production line differ, but all the manufacturing techniques and good practices remain the same. And we've done a great job here, and the team's done an amazing job here at scaling. But as we look to move even further up that curve, bringing someone on with just such deep experience, not just within production scaling, but within operations, it was just kind of the right time for the company to create that position.
Fantastic. Thank you.
And your next question comes from the line of Matt Akers with Wells Fargo. Your line is open.
Yeah, hey guys, good afternoon. Thanks for the question. I wanted to ask about space services. You guys kind of teased that on slide 4. Just curious, I know you don't want to reveal what that could look like yet, but just curious what kind of time frame you had in mind. It seems like, kind of the phase 1 and 2 are in pretty good shape. So I guess to move to phase 3, I mean, do we need to get Neutron sort of at a higher production cadence? Are there, maybe more parts of the portfolio to fill in? Just curious how you think of kind of the timing there.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So look, everything is irrelevant without a reusable high cadence launch. So Neutron is really the key to unlocking that. And if you look at Starlink it's a good example. It's a great spacecraft, but actually the thing that has really made that possible is a high cadence, low cost launch, and that in turn is made possible by a reusable launch vehicle. So until Neutron is flying at some level of cadence, it's kind of academic to talk about deploying constellations.
Yeah, got it. Okay. And just curious on this Neutron deal, or maybe just Neutron in general, thoughts on kind of what the progress payment maybe looks like on that. Just curious, I guess, one, if there's maybe some lumpiness in cash flow around that, just because those are pretty big dollar items, and also just how we should think about kind of the advanced payments versus kind of working capital aspect as that program ramps up.
Yeah, I can take that one, Pete. So we have a fairly standard launch services agreement that we've obviously used many times with Electron, and we're leveraging most of that forward on Neutron. And you're right that building this this Neutron vehicle it will be a challenging working capital cycle, at least initially, particularly when you think about the context here of reusability, right? So I think we've never said that we plan to basically have a fully reusable vehicle for the first launch. So as we kind of work our way towards full reusability, we'll be getting more kind of benefits from a working capital perspective as we do that. But the first few launches here are certainly going to be cash consuming. So you can think about the structure. Most of these LSAs have a deposit, and then there's milestone payments. And if you look at our Electron business, typically we've collected about 60% of the contract value by the time we actually start building the rocket. This might be a little bit different because we're at the very early stages of kind of transitioning from R&D into production. But you can think of Neutron should look very, very, very similar to what we've kind of disclosed and kind of produced in our results as we have with Electron. So I did nothing too unusual with this one. It's just it's the first few rockets out of the chute. So we got to go through that transition period. And as we experienced also on Electron, the Electron came out initially with not kind of target margins, obviously, but as we kind of build towards that, I think that there's a combination of the fact that we'll be collecting payments against milestones in the contracts, but also getting production efficiencies and ultimately reusability, which is the real key to kind of getting Neutron to its target model, which we think will look very similar to the long-term model for Electron. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of context.
Yes, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Your next question comes from the line of Erik Rasmussen with Stifel. Your line is open.
Yeah, thanks for taking the questions, and congrats on the progress with Neutron. Maybe just on that subject, Neutron, I know there's not a lot you want to really share at this time, but are you replacing anyone, or are you being brought on to sort of, as another alternative, just because of, like Adam, you said, there's a number of medium rockets that are, in the market or that will be potentially in the market in the coming years. But is this just sort of, you think, a hedge because you guys are a lot closer than some others?
Yeah, I think with respect to kind of commercial contracts, and in some cases, yeah, definitely replacing. I would say that Eric, in the NSSL world, it's bringing on new providers. I think if you look at the last NSSL Lane 1 Phase 3 award, 100% of that award went to one particular launch provider, because there was nobody else. So in some cases it's replacing, and in some cases it's just being brought on as a new alternative.
Okay. And then you stated that the ASPs, you're going to be pretty firm on pricing. Is that the 50 to 55 million that you initially talked about, and that's sort of where things have settled maybe for these two dedicated missions? And it says you're starting in mid 26. Would both of those potentially happen in 26, or how should we think about sort of timing, assuming you do meet the mid 2025 for your first test launch?
Yeah, I mean the launch pricing, as we pointed out, is that was a really important thing for us, and I think as I've said, I made, well, I kind of had to, but with Electron, it took us years to flush out bad kind of contracts with respect to ASP. So no, this contract is in line with our previously discussed ASP for Neutron, and then on the we're selling real slots with real launch windows. So we kind of somewhat at the bequest of the customer. So so the 26 timeframes for those launches are the customers driven requests.
Gotcha. Maybe just staying with launch. You're sitting at 12 launches year to date. You previously gave a range of 15 to 18. You have another one slotted in the coming weeks at the earliest. You would need sort of 4 in this quarter to get to the bottom of that range. But you still feel like that's a viable range for you, the 15 to 18 where we sit today? I appreciate you not giving specific guidance on that, but I just want to get a sense of your confidence level on that prior guidance of 15 to 18.
Well, I mean, if you recall, at the start of the year, we thought we were going to do 22, but that so I'm always a little bit gun shy on this these days. But no, I think we've got certainly a very busy fourth quarter, and at this stage, the customers are looking good, so I think we'll be within that range.
Okay, and then just on the NSSL, I just want to clarify the RFPs opened up pretty recently within the last 2 weeks. Does that mean you'll be available for this particular one, or it's the next cycle because of the time frame of Neutron at the earliest of mid 25?
Yeah, the way it works is that you have to demonstrate you can launch in 25 to be on ramped, and then once you're on ramped, then you'll bid for various task orders. So there'll be there's kind of the task order is separate from the on ramp, and those task orders are released at the times that NSSL or the Space Force decides to.
I think, Eric, what we're saying that, even though we'll be on-ramping in 2025, we wouldn't be awarded any contracts for launch in 2025. And right now we're planning, 1 test launch in 2025. We're talking about 3 launches in 2026, and then we've talked about 5 launches in 2027. And given kind of the discussion that we've had, previously about the first customer for Neutron that we announced today, that's obviously consuming some of that capacity in 2026. So the most likely scenario is could you see something in 2026 for NSSL? It's a possibility, but it's probably not the most likely scenario. That probably looks more like a 2027, but never say never. Right. Okay, great. And then just one last thing on the backlog of clarification, the $326 million for launch, does that include this latest award win for the 2 for Neutron? No, it does not, because that was a Q3 ending, and this contract was signed post the end of Q3. Great. Okay. So it'll show up in our Q4 backlog.
Great. Thank you.
Your next question comes from the line of Suji Desilva with Roth Capital. Your line is open.
Hi, Pete. Hi, Adam. Congrats on the progress and the Neutron success here. The gross margin improvement here, Adam, is that the relative contribution between launch and space systems sequentially in 3Q and 4Q relatively even? And can you give an update on the solar gross margin improvement? Is there tailwind still there?
So the gross margin percentages are actually pretty close across. I mean, they're pretty consistent across launch and space systems right now. That's just a function of kind of, again, where we are in the margin improvement path for the launch part of the business, and then just kind of where we are in mix within space systems. So, if you look at the mix of our business being roughly 70% space systems, 30% launch, I mean, I think kind of gives you, it's all proportional. So you just take the percentage of the business times the same rough margin calculation and just apply it.
Okay. And then on solar, Adam, does that remain a tailwind?
So solar is, solar's actually been progressing. It's a little bit slower than we thought. We've talked about that on some prior calls where, we expected to be at target margins within, which was, we said about 30% non-GAAP gross margin for that business within 2 years of the acquisition. So we acquired that business in early 2022. So we're a bit behind, but we're making steady progress. I would say when we look at our backlog for that business, we're really not booking. I can't remember the last time, maybe Pete can correct me, I can't remember the last time that we've actually booked business lower than our target gross margin. So it's all about kind of flushing out some of that older. In fact, there's really just one bad contract in the mix that we inherited. Unfortunately, it was a large part of I think it was almost $100 million of the $150 million backlog at deal close that came along that was, basically essentially at zero margin. So as we build the new business at target margins or better, that's starting to flow through now, and we're seeing that come through in a little bit more profound way. And so I think that, I think we all have actually probably more conviction now about getting to that 30% better target gross margin for that business. It's just taken us a little bit longer. And so I think, it's also not too dissimilar to our launch business where it's a very kind of fixed cost oriented business. So when you have a good quarter where you're shipping a lot more product, you get the benefit of that overhead absorption. And so, as we mentioned earlier, and we mentioned in our prepared remarks, the solar business was particularly strong in Q3.
Okay, great. And then my other question's on the launch business. I understand that Neutron's going to add to the backlog this quarter, but Electron growing $55 million. I'm just wondering how that compares to the last few quarters. Is that kind of in a range, or is it accelerating? And what the drivers, if it is accelerating, are? Is it ASP trending up, or any color there would be helpful?
Yeah, I mean, I'll have a crack at him.
Yeah, go ahead, Pete. Yeah.
I'll have a crack and you can maybe add a bit more color as well. So launch is lumpy. Like actually launching the rockets is lumpy. So is the contracts, and we can go a quarter without signing anything. So as far as historical kind of look backs, I mean, certainly this is been a good quarter for Electron, but it tends to be pretty lumpy, throughout.
Yeah, and if you look at, certainly we book more launches, and again, as Pete said, it's lumpy because we're chasing bigger multi-launch agreements, but also the ASP has been very supportive. So I mentioned earlier that the average selling price for 2024 for Electron works out to be about $7.5 million per launch, and we've also talked on previous calls that our total backlog for Electron is priced at around $8.2 million ASP. So we're doing better on booking at higher prices, so that we're having a beneficial ASP mix effect, and that's obviously helping contribute to the backlog growth, but also to what we believe is kind of a nice steady progress towards our target margins for that Electron business.
Okay, very helpful. Thanks, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Your next question comes from the line of Andre Madrid with BTIG. Your line is open.
Adam, Peter, thanks for the time. I know we kind of danced around it, but I wanted to just ask more specifically, how much was total Neutron development cost in 3Q? I know previously you said about $160 for the year or about $40 million a quarter. And also, like, is that kind of still an appropriate target, looking all in?
Yeah, I'm just pulling up the number right now. Yeah, no, this in Q3 it was total. Well, you have to split out between the different elements, but if you look at total net spend for Neutron across OpEx and CapEx, it was just a hair under $44 million.
Got it. Okay.
And I think that's gonna, step up as we continue to kind of get towards the first launch. So that's why this first launch of Neutron is so important for us, because that really has such a tremendous impact on the P&L, right? Where we have all of this cost right now just hitting R&D. Once you get past that first test launch and we carry the first paying customer, everything flips over. You've got now R&D associated with it, cost of sales, and so forth. So it's a super important thing for us to get that first launch off, because it kind of caps that initial spend, because you'll have minimum viable product both in the rocket and on the infrastructure side of the house. And so I think probably, along with that, we still feel very, very comfortable that we're within our target original budget for Neutron. And if you think about, we talked, this is going back, when we came public, 3 years ago now, a little over 3 years ago, we said it was going to take roughly 3-4 years and cost $250 to $300 million. And, we put that in pretty stark contrast to what some other kind of medium and larger launch vehicles have cost, in the many, many billions of dollars, and taken, the better part of a decade to get to first launch. So we feel like we're on track, and we're going to kind of set a new benchmark for, capital efficiency and timing of getting a new launch vehicle to the pad.
Got it. And if I could squeeze in one more, could you maybe highlight backlog at some of the non-Photon space systems businesses like PSC, Sinclair? I mean, how is expansion and acquiring more business progressed at that line of business?
Yeah, those businesses continue to grow at a pretty healthy clip. If you look at our target growth for the components business within space systems is around 20%. And we feel very comfortable. We've been, delivering, better than that, considerably better than that in some parts of our business. I would say that, of our components businesses, Sinclair's probably had, experienced the most recent growth. And, that's driven by, the Mega Constellation reaction wheel contract that we've talked about in the past that, has been starting to ship. But, we've seen strength, across all of that. If you take it in aggregate, we kind of look at it across all of it. And when you look at our merchant business or the components business, there's really two pieces to that. There's the merchant components that we sell into other spacecraft manufacturers, and then there's the integrated or vertically integrated supply element, where we're now supplying our own feed, if you will, into these spacecraft manufacturing projects that we've won, like SDA and like the MDA Globalstar. So it's really, the growth is fueled not only by overall macro growth in the broader merchant market, but also from our own internal consumption as well. So we feel really good about, continuing a 20% CAGR for that business. I think, some will be stronger than others, right? Like this year, I said we're having more strength in Sinclair, and that probably continues through next year. And then, as we look forward into 2025 and 26, based on a lot of these big programs, we're going to have very good years for our solar too, because, we're dedicating a significant amount of our capacity to internal programs. And overall, it's actually has a very healthy, kind of roadmap, I would say, for gross margin as well. If you look at the components or subsystems business, that's kind of already in the, I call it low to mid 40s non-GAAP gross margin. And we think there's some upside to that. And then there's just the kind of a little bit of the offset where you have these bigger, program gross margin models that are kind of more towards, call it 30%. So you've got that blending effect there. But we feel really good about, all the elements of that subsystem business.
And since you brought it up, what's the mix between what goes in-house for components versus what's, delivered as a merchant supplier? And do you guys have a target mix for space systems, I guess?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have that data at the tip of my fingers, and I don't really want to try to guess on that. I mean, I think for some of the businesses we have a little bit more visibility. So I'd say, for example, I think in our solar business, I think our internal capacity consumption right now is probably only about 10%. So 90% is going out to the merchant market, to a lot of the people that sell into the national security market for these exquisite systems. When you look at the separation systems business, for example, we sell a much more externally than we consume internally, just the fact because it's one of the most predominant separation systems that flies on basically all rockets. So there really is a mix. But that's a good question. We can certainly follow up offline and see if we can get you a more kind of concrete answer to that.
Yeah, definitely. I would appreciate that. Adam, thanks so much for the call. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
The next question comes from Jason Gursky with Citi. Your line is open.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Pete, I want to have you just walk us all through, if you don't mind, one more time, why it is that we have to do 1, 3, and 5. And if there isn't an opportunity to go a little faster here, you suggest that, history would suggest with others you got to do it that way, but why is that the case? And Adam, you talked about throwing CapEx. There's some more CapEx coming into the mix here. Is this something we can throw some capital at and speed things up a bit?
Jason, you asked the question that Adam asked me every day, and there's some things that you can throw as much capital as you want, but until you fly, you can only learn a certain number of things. And look, 135 is a pretty good scaling rate at best. And fundamentally, you fly your first rocket, and you'll do the best job that you think you can. There's a whole lot of stuff you can test on the ground, and then there's a whole lot of stuff you can't test on the ground. It's just we'll obviously forward build as many of the components that we think in many of the systems and structures as we can. But you can find yourself just in a dead end pretty quickly. But it just takes time to scale the production line. And we've tried to front end it as loaded as best we can. With the engine production line, generally the engines are the longest pole in the tent from a production perspective. So we've really leaned into that. So hopefully we can do better. But it just takes time to put one on the pad and commission it and learn from it, and then roll those iterations into the next vehicle. And we're flying customers' payloads, so everything has to be very methodically thought through, and every change is well qualified to reach that cadence. I guess it might be a slightly different story if you had no customers and you just threw everything at it and had a different risk posture. But we're looking to get into commercial operations as quickly as we can. So when you're flying a customer, you can't just kind of be fast and loose. You have to be very methodical in any of the changes that you roll in. So and we just don't want to be unrealistic with what's been what can tangibly be delivered.
But Jason, I'll be asking Pete that question every day going forward as well. So don't worry about that.
Yeah, if you can do it on my behalf, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And then Pete, look, 1, 3, and 5. Okay, so we've got 6 launches, one's a test. But as you look at the pipeline, I mean, over that time period, if you had more capacity, is there more demand out there? I just want to, and maybe strip out the national security launch, just on the commercial side of things. I'm just trying to get a better gauge of supply and demand equilibrium.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the fundamental reason why you're asking this question, Adam asked this question, everybody asks this question, is how can we scale faster? And indeed customers. But the worst thing you can do is promise a customer that you're going to be able to provide a whole bunch of launch. They make a big commitment to you, and then you don't deliver, because that's just it plays havoc with their business. So that's not good for their business or long term relationships, or quite frankly our reputation. So of all the things we worry about, I think we've said before, demand's not one of them. We worry more about how fast can we scale the Neutron rather than, are there customers there to, to fly on it for sure.
Right. Okay, then last one for me. I'm just kind of curious. We've got a new administration coming to town. Let's see here. I guess what policy statements have you heard to date that either have you encouraged or are giving you a little bit of pause? And what would you suggest we here on the outside kind of pay attention to here as this transition happens? What are you going to be looking for and looking to hear from the new administration?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I think, what I take out of it is that I don't think there's ever been such a focus on space from any administration. Perhaps back in the Apollo era, but I mean, it's very clear that this administration has a very strong focus on space, which is good. And when space wins, Rocket Lab wins. Also, we see a very strong focus on national security, which is obviously a core part of our business. But I guess probably the thing I'm most excited about is there's a real focus on moving away from the kind of slow government contracting and really focusing on commercial, providing much more of the traditional space and government services, which is really, when you think about it, there's only a few companies that are really well positioned to take advantage of those commercial opportunities, and us being one of them. So, look, I look out on the new administration with quite a bullish outlook, given those kind of three things.
Right. Okay, great. I'll pass the line. Appreciate it.
And your next question comes from the line of Michael Leshock with KeyBanc Capital Markets. Your line is open.
Hey, thank you. I wanted to ask on space systems. You've talked about both organic and inorganic ways to scale the business. Was just hoping for an update there on the M&A pipeline, whether you see any new opportunities. And then secondly, you also have those organic initiatives like additional clean room capacity that you already have the footprint for. Just wondering if you could provide some more details there and how much is left to go on those initiatives. Thanks.
I can take a swing at this, Adam, and maybe you can follow it up. On the kind of the organic stuff, we always have a number of new products and things in development. Some of those are spin-offs from some of the programs that we're developing. Some of them are just areas that we think there's a market opportunity for, and the way we kind of talk about those is obviously you've seen past product releases from us, so that will and when we have something that we think is ready, then we'll release it. And I think we have a pretty strong reputation that we release it when it's done. We don't kind of talk about it until really it's done. And you saw that with even reaction wheels or something like the HASTE missions. We announced a HASTE mission, and then a number of weeks later we launched one. So that's kind of the way we roll with organic product development. And then inorganic, we always maintain a pretty healthy pipeline, and maybe Adam, you can provide a bit more comment on that.
Yeah, I'd say on the corporate development front, we continue to look at a lot of assets out there. I think that one thing is we're very selective, right? So I think if you look at the assets that we've acquired in the past, the team is always at the center of it. If you look at the fact that you pick any one of the deals, they've always been leading products in their area. You pick from solar, where they've never had a single failure on orbit, to bringing new kind of innovative capabilities to the market through the software capabilities for command and control software for ASI and separation systems from PSC and so forth. So it's really I would say we continue to look at things, and what we've largely gotten the satellite bus into a point where we have most of the capabilities there that we think that we need to be kind of that, to fulfill the end-to-end requirements there. There's still a few little things here and there that we're working on, and we're actually trying to address those, and some of those organically as well, not just inorganically. But probably the biggest missing piece to space systems from that's going to be filled likely through inorganic is going to be on the payload side. So we really kind of stop at the payload right now, and certainly as we've talked many times about our grander ambitions of having our own applications on orbit, that's going to be benefited by having our own internal capabilities around the payload side of the system. So, there's fortunately for us, there's actually quite a few assets out there that are quite interesting that are kind of, I'd say, poised to be part of a much bigger, consolidated platform like we're building. So I think there's ample opportunities there, but we're very disciplined. It's got to be the right team, it's got to be the right time, and it's got to be the right price. And so far, we haven't gotten those 3 stars to align, but I'm pretty confident that we'll get some of those stars to align in the not too distant future. And I think that will also provide a bit of a breadcrumbing for folks to understand a little bit more specifically which applications we're targeting, because a lot of the payload is obviously very specific to the application, and so having kind of some insight into kind of the capabilities that we'd be acquiring would kind of give you some ideas about where we're going from an applications perspective, which I know everyone's chomping at the bit to try to understand better.
Okay, great. I appreciate all that detail. I'll leave it there. Thanks, guys.
Your next question comes from the line of Anthony Valentini with Goldman Sachs. Your line is open.
Hey, guys. Thanks for taking my question. You got Anthony on for Noah tonight. Sorry to beat this point to death here, but it's been pretty well publicized at this point that Amazon's Kuiper has to get over 1,000 satellites into orbit, I think by mid-2026. And they have orders with some of your competitors for launch vehicles that either have not launched yet or in very limited cadence. So I guess my question is, do you guys stand to benefit from that between now and 2026, where you guys can get a piece of that pie, or is it what Peter was talking to in an earlier answer? It's just not possible given capacity and how many slots that you guys have available.
Well, I'll put it this way, as we said, Anthony, the demand is not something that we worry about, and that kind of falls into that category.
Okay, that's helpful. And then, Adam, for you, is the systems segment profitable today?
Well, we only report our segments down to the gross margin line, and that's because we have a lot of shared resources across the different areas of development and production and so forth. And also, we have one key decision maker, which is Pete, who kind of provides the overall kind of investment decisions or mandates across both businesses. So I would say from a technical accounting perspective, we can't say that the space systems business is profitable on that level. But what we can tell you is that when we look at kind of anecdotally across each of the lines of business, it would be safe to say that that the vast majority, if not all, of the cash consuming nature of this business is coming from Neutron. Right. So I think that's one of the most important things about getting Neutron to a minimum viable product in the first launch up. Things will become a lot more clear at that point. And actually at some level doesn't really matter, because then the overall profitability of the company starts to shine through. So, again, I would say that we can't say technically that space systems is profitable at this point, because we just don't account for the business at that level right now. That could change in the future, but that's not the current kind of approach we take to it.
Okay, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Last one for me here. I just want to confirm the test flight on Neutron in 2025. That's no revenue, right?
Correct. Yeah, there won't be any revenue associated with that launch, but we are working on things that would allow us to have probably some contra R&D associated with that. So looking to do some creative things there where we can kind of buy down our cost of that test launch. And so that's something that we're working pretty hard towards, and hopefully we can get some of that to come into focus.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate the time.
Yep.
Your next question comes from the line of Cai von Romer with TD Cowen. Your line is open.
Super. Thanks so much. So Adam, your ASPs for Electron have gone down sequentially for 3 straight quarters, and yet your gross margin has improved. Now, I know that costs are kind of specific to each mission, but what does that tell us about the underlying core profitability of Electron?
Mm. Yeah, it's really a function of so when you talk about ASP, the ASP is a function of customer timing, right? And so we have some customers that sign up for many launches, and as a result of signing up for these bulk buys, they naturally get a lower price. And we get the benefit of having actually better margins on a lot of those flights because a lot of the work doesn't have to get redone. All the the GNC work that you have to do for each individual flight, you don't have to redo that. You get maybe the benefit of having payload adapter plates that are common, across multi-launch deals. So a lot of what you're seeing, the ASP is again just a function of timing of where the customer wants to land. And so we're very comfortable kind of with the number that we set for the year at $7.5 million being the average. And of course, as I mentioned before, our total backlog is priced at $8.2 million per Electron. So that kind of shows you where it's going. And then, the reason why the gross margin has gone up, despite having the optics on the ASP, is because we've been getting production efficiencies, right? So as we've gotten better at building these Electrons, the cost is coming down, which is helpful for us. So even as ASP may go down, gross margin go up. I think that's kind of the most salient points of kind of the gross margin trend analysis.
Got it. And the second one is, you started the year, Peter, you mentioned that 22 launches sort of scheduled or targeted, and we're going to probably end up at 15 to 18. Have you ever thought, and one of the big problems is that you commit to a certain price and the customer commits to a certain date, but it's not a hard date. Have you ever thought of a kind of pricing so that if the customer misses, the price goes up? And I know that you have other competitors, but certainly if you could get your number of launches up, you've made a big point of how high the fixed launch costs are. Is there any thought of kind of getting that volume, thinking of creative ways of getting that volume up?
Yeah, some launch contracts have provisions for penalties, but if a customer has had a failure of something in a TVAC, and then you start loading penalties on them, it's not great for long-term relationships. And I think the learnings here for us, and I think for everybody as well, is that the service that we provide is a bespoke, dedicated service for customers to launch, and they pay the premium for that. You compare an Electron to a rideshare, it's many times higher. So that's what they're paying the premium for. I guess the point that we try and make is that once a customer goes into backlog and we start collecting the cash from that customer, these customers never go away. They just sort of shift around. It's just a peculiarity of the way that revenue is recognized on launch. So no, I think we continue to play launch whack-a-mole, and wherever possible, like you see we did in the last quarter, we'll take quick turns business and fill some gaps. But it's kind of really the reality of the service that we provide.
Terrific. Thank you so much.
And there are no further questions at this time. I will turn the call back over to Peter Beck for closing remarks.
Great, and thanks very much for everybody sticking around for the questions as well. Much appreciated. But before we close out today, I just wanted to draw your attention to some of the up-and-coming conferences we'll be attending. We'll look forward to sharing more exciting news and updates with you there. But that wraps up today's call, and thanks everybody for sticking around and listen to all the progress that's been made. The team is certainly very proud of this quarter and what we've achieved this year. So thanks very much.
This does conclude today's conference. You may now disconnect.
I was muted because the keyboard sounds were bothering some people. First of all, thanks for the super chats. We had a few in there. Jeff, of course, I've seen him around for a while. Darren as well, and then Fool, the biggest supporter for the past year. He's around every live stream, always appreciated. Not gonna lie, I'm starting to get a little tired here. We're hitting the 2-hour mark, so definitely a long time to try to be alert and engaging with the chat and streaming. If you have been here for the entire time, thank you very much. I know, as I said, it's quite a long live stream. So we'll keep the closing remarks pretty low. At least I'll try to. Take one last look at the stock price here. Looking very strong, up 24.69, of course, percent. So great day for the stock. The market is loving it. I think a lot of this, the biggest catalyst is that first contract for Neutron. Very excited to see that one, especially the confidence they have that they'll be launching even more for this same constellation down the line. A lot of people were speculating on them being Amazon in this deal. Personally, I'm leaning towards no. And the reason is because they said in the presentation here, I don't know if I can find the exact slide, but they said there's a chance that they will end up launching the entire constellation. Could see Neutron deploy the entire constellation. So there's no way that is Kuiper, because we do know for sure Blue will launch some as well as some others. Great day for all of us, though. What else do I want to say? If we have any last questions before I go, we can try to get some of those. Obviously, also interested in hearing your thoughts. I've never tried this Q&A. And thank you for the new members as well. I believe 5 were gifted to the community, so that is much appreciated. Let's see how this Q&A feature works. I think this is new. So I added a Q&A. If you want to type anything in, let me know, and we will try to answer a few before I go. There was one very difficult, very good question. Actually, there are 2 questions I did want to address. First one's easier. They're asking basically what are the shares outstanding and why is it going up? It's very simple. So shares outstanding are, the number of shares in the company. So if Rocket Lab as a total is worth $5 billion and there's, you have 100 shares of 500 million outstanding, then you have a bigger slice of the pie than if the total shares outstanding are... Oh, we have another super chat here by Trosby. That's a big one as well. Thank you so much. So yeah, shares outstanding are just how many shares are available to invest and how many pieces the whole Rocket Lab pie is divided up into, and that will be going up in Q4 for stock-based compensation. They give shares to employees to, get good talent. They also hired a new COO who will be receiving a fairly large number of shares as well. There can be dilution events to issue new shares and raise more capital. They had that one announced previously as well. Let's see the questions. How will this impact your financial models? Honestly, we've blown so far past what I expected that, first of all, I've got to rethink things. I'm not selling my shares, continuing to hold. How this will affect my price targets is a big question. I do think down the line, this one day will be a $20 billion company. Will it be a straight line there? No. Is it possible that on the way to 20 billion, the stock price gets ahead of itself and then we have a big dip? Yes. I'm very happy to hold for the entire ride, and that's kind of my plan. But right now, to me, it feels a little frothy, so I'm not buying at this very second. People who are averaging and just buying whenever they can, fully respect that choice. However, right now I just have a lot of shares, so at this level after seeing a run like this, a massive run like this, something you don't see every day. I'm taking a little pause on adding more shares, but not selling. But I will, have to dive back into my spreadsheets because I haven't fully updated my valuation model and my targets for 2029-ish. I like to look 5 years out. 2028, 2029. We'll see how it goes. Yes, Heath, I have heard, I don't know if I'm supposed to talk about this, but I guess maybe it's okay. I've heard that we will have a very short group discussion with, I believe, Peter in a few days. So it will be me and a few of the other guys you're probably familiar with, so it won't be one-on-one, and it will be relatively short, but excited to have that. So if you guys have any great ideas for questions, do drop by the Discord server in the description of most of my videos and let me know any question ideas, because if it's really good, maybe I'll think about asking it. These days, I'm more focused on space systems and Neutron than Electron, so it probably won't be focusing my questions on Electron as much, but definitely appreciate any ideas you guys have, because it's very often that commenters and people on the Discord server and on Twitter actually do give me really good ideas that culminates in some kind of a trade, an investment, a question in an interview, or just thinking about different things, making a video I never would have made otherwise. What else? Did they give an estimate for the first commercial Neutron launch? Well, it's going to be 2026. That is what they are expecting. Possible acquisition? Yeah, I threw it could be Mynaric. It'll be some payload company that makes like antennas and does the communications. I almost wondered if perhaps they're a little worried about revealing their hand too soon. Because once they acquire a payload company and you see what kind of payloads they want to fly on their own satellites, that starts to give you an idea of what the company will do in their own constellation. And I do know they want to keep that under wraps as long as possible because they don't want SpaceX or someone else trying to, jump into that space ahead of them. So maybe they're actually strategically waiting a while before acquiring a payload company. I thought about Redwire once because they are supplying a lot of antennas and things like that for the SDA constellation Rocket Lab is building out. Mynaric is another one. There's a few others out there. We'll have to see what happens with that. After 19, also doing a super chat for $10. Very much appreciated. Another name that has been around for quite a long time. Ask if they'll apply water recovery ideas to Neutron and if they'll try to recover from soft water landing. Interesting. So you want to know if they're going to recover that booster after it splashes into the water, the first one. That could be an interesting question. Yeah. I doubt, they're not going to reuse it, but maybe they'll fish it out and learn some things from it. Could be expensive. Yeah, no telling when or where a pullback would be or how much. So, yeah, it's a tough one. What are your thoughts on the MSR contract after? Yeah, they did go out of their way to talk about MSR a lot. And I've said previously, I would be so excited if they won this contract, not only for the financial side of things and what it would mean for the company, but also just putting them really on the map in terms of like a massive historic space mission, bringing back samples from the surface of Mars for the first time, looking for those signs of life. I do wonder, though, because obviously we know Elon is big in with Trump and they're very friendly right now. Elon wants to send a Starship to the surface of Mars as soon as possible. What better way to get NASA to pay for that than carry a little return vehicle that could, grab those and send them back? So SpaceX also in the mix, Wow, everyone is being very generous today. Thank you, Cam, as well. This has been a really great stream. Record number of people showing up live and tons of donations. You guys are the best. Thank you very much. So yeah, I think Mars sample return, I would still say the likelihood for that landing for Rocket Lab is like a quarter or less, but I would be so thrilled if it did happen. We'll have to see on that one. There is a committee that looks at all these studies and makes a decision. So, there is that sort of, it's not like it goes directly to Trump or whatever, but you got to think there's back channels there. And if he wants to do someone a favor, anyway, we'll see what happens with that. And yeah, some people thinking maybe this will go past $20. And that's a great feeling though, Ace, because, it's the performance. It's great. So yeah. Oh, and someone else asked if there is a price where I would consider selling Rocket Lab. And for me, this is an incredibly difficult question because I love this company so much. And it goes back to being the difference between investing and being a fan. And what I've said is, when it comes to money, I have to be an investor, and the investment always has to make sense. I will always be a fan of Rocket Lab, but if there, and I'm not saying it will come, if there came a point where the valuation just made no sense at all to me, like I would have to sell as an investor. I would still be their number one cheerleader, but investing is about making money. And if Rocket Lab was valued at $10 trillion or something today, of course I would have to sell my shares. I'm not saying I think they're going to hit that point where I need to sell, but I think as an investor, you have to pay attention to what the valuation is. You have to make sure they can live up to it, and that the future earnings will justify that valuation in your mind. So if Rocket Lab achieved everything I ever dreamed was possible, and that still couldn't justify the earnings, the price today, I would have to consider it, but it hasn't gotten to that point yet. But I'm still not saying it's super cheap right now. Psychologically, I find it difficult to buy at $18 when I was buying at $4 like 8 months ago. And I'm sure there's a lot of you in that same boat as me. So luckily, we were in early, and we sat through a lot of the sideways movement, probably like 2 years of it, and it felt never ending. But when you get that move, it's always so quick. And it feels like we've basically had that full 2 years of steady progress and steady growth happen in like 2 months. So, the stock market kind of catching up there. New Zealand, no, they said they won't launch it in New Zealand. The infrastructure isn't in place, just in terms of even providing propellants and like liquid oxygen. The country doesn't really have the supply for it. Maybe at some point they could launch out of Australia or somewhere else, but it sounds like it won't be in New Zealand. Yeah, great day. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'm starting to lose my voice, so I will probably call it at that. The stock is up big. The new contract for Neutron, extremely exciting. Obviously, it's nice to see 55 million in Electron contracts signed in the quarter. And I will come out with a shorter summary video because I am sure there's a lot of people out there that aren't going to want to rewatch a full 2-hour, 15-minute live stream. So try to come up with something 15 minutes or less to get the big points across and give some thoughts on that soon. And I'll see you guys very soon. Thank you again to everyone who subscribed, became a member, did a super chat, all very much appreciated. And if you are new here, please do consider subscribing because we still have, a decent number of viewers going. All right, guys, have a great day and a great rest of the week. I will see you very soon for the next